Welcome to the last few days. I'm Stanley Farrar.
And I'm Robert Farrar.
And I'm Joshua Farrar.
You know that Greta has been in the news recently.
Oh, she's still relevant? I forgot she existed.
Oh, no. No. She just stood up and gave a speech in Italy saying blah, 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 blah.
Literally?
Literally. She took and got up there and stated that all the government officials, all they say when it comes to the environment and global warming is blah 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 blah, and their actions do nothing. They're all talk and nothing else. They're just blah 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 blah, and she went on like that for quite a while.
No,
She didn't give any solutions.
of course she didn't. She's mentally an 8-year-old.
How generous of you.
Let's see, how
I
old
didn't
is
say
she
she was
now?
a
19?
particularly adept 8-year-old. There's a large sample size to land on the scale of.
But her parents are actually. She's showing her upbringing because her parents are Marxists, and as such, she's a Marxist, and she unless you go full commie, she isn't happy.
True.
But Sky News had Sky News Australia just chewed her up.
You know, speaking of the environment, or plastics in general, right? One thing that's bothered me for years, or ever since my job became maintenance, right? Is that people who say plastic doesn't rot has never had to maintain equipment with a lot of plastic in it.
Yeah, I learned that from a 1980s motorcycle. The plastic rots.
Yes, plastic does rot.
And so does rubber.
Oh, yeah.
In fact,
Faster than plastic.
yeah. It's really astonishing how these people seem to think this stuff doesn't break down. And yeah, it doesn't break down as fast as something like sawdust or your standard dead body, but it breaks down faster than wood.
It depends on which part of your standard dead body.
True.
It breaks down
And
way
it is on the
faster than
environment.
bone.
Not if the
Dead
bone is
body.
left to erosion.
Or in acidic soil.
Or in acidic soil.
Because they're still finding bones from like 1,000 years ago.
Granted, there was... So, this is an off sequitur. But I did recently have to, sweep a rabbit skeleton out from under a building. Who knows how long that thing's been there.
Did you make a display out of it?
No?
Start a museum?
No, we just sort of swept it into a dustpan and then
A
threw it over the
museum
fence.
of osteology. There's money to be made for museums of osteology.
Not for a rabbit skeleton.
But this whole global warming nonsense, and they told Australia a few years ago during the drought that Oh, this is the new environmental normal because of the global warming. We'll never take and be see the rivers and the streams and the estuaries fill back up with water again because as this is the new normal. Now they're having floods.
And they're still going to pin it on climate change.
Now, the weird thing is
Oh yeah,
that climate change, in of itself, I may say something a little bit controversial here, but it's kind of proven. Climate change happens. Now,
Well, that's part of the
here's
genius
the other thing.
using that term.
Climate change is completely normal and has been happening far longer than humans have been capable of influencing anything about the environment.
I heard a scientist recently say that what's wrong with global warming? If you take and you look at the fossils in Antarctica, it used to be a tropical paradise. So global warming is actually just returning to the norm.
I'm okay with it.
So am I.
I'm okay with heat. I speak
I'm
often
fine
of
with
how I
heat,
don't want
it's
to
the
go to the
dry I
frozen,
don't
bitter
like.
lands up north.
I used to listen to songs from a group out of Minnesota promoting global warming.
Yes, Minnesotans for climate change. So they can actually live in their state instead of merely scrounging to survive the frozen wastelands.
Frankly, they should have moved south.
A
It's
lot of
pretty
people
cold
seem
where y'all are
opposed to
going.
the comforting arms of the South. Yeah, which is why I'm happy we're no longer there and have little interest of returning.
Oh,
That's an odd thing now that I think about it. Why is it that Robert and I in particular happen to inherit the weird genes from our grandmother that says we are always cold everywhere we go?
I don't know. You would think I would be. I was born in the subtropics.
But you can't wear a jacket in 90-degree weather.
Hey, I wore a jacket in
No, I
Bahrain
cannot.
in the summer.
Oof, I couldn't do
In
that.
air conditioned spaces.
Do what? No, no,
In
no,
air
no.
conditioned spaces.
Well, yes, but also no. I did wear the jackets in the air conditioned spaces. But I went out into town in said jacket.
I bet they thought you were insane.
I don't care what a bunch of Arabs think.
uh, well, we're finding that there's a great controversy that has been stirred up over the governor of Florida stating that Australia is not a free country.
He's right.
He compared them to communist China.
He's right. And I
Oh,
think
I'm not saying he's wrong.
they've kind of lost their grounds to argue against him as soon as they started attacking their protesters.
Yeah.
Has anyone seen the attack ads against Ron DeSantis?
No, no, I haven't. But I'm kind
No,
of
I
half the
haven't.
world away.
They're they're hilarious. They've got all that really dark, dramatic music behind it, and then they've got clips of him being like, "We don't live in a we don't live in a totalitarian state. I believe in individual freedom."
It sounds like those are attack ads.
Yes, those are attack ads.
It's
I
the
would think they'd be
At the very end, they were
promoted.
like, "Freedom to
Uh,
kill people from the virus."
it's the best they can do.
They were some of the
I
most
was thinking
flattering
that
attack
would
ads I've ever heard in
actually
my life.
promote you.
Now, I've heard that the feds are attacking Texas over the abortion bill, and they're trying to shut it down.
Yes.
Yes, but they can't
I heard they put it on
because the
hold
Supreme Court's
pending a
already approved
Supreme
it.
Court. Really? Because the news article I heard today said that they put it on hold.
Yeah, no,
The
the Supreme
Supreme
Court
Court
hasn't
has
seen it
already
yet.
declared it constitutional, haven't they? It must have been the appeals court that
No?
saw it. I thought I thought that Supreme Court had already decided on it.
Because I heard today that it was on
Nope,
hold
they haven't even
pending
seen it yet.
review.
It's on the docket. A lot of things are on the Supreme Court
It may have
docket.
been the state's Supreme Court. Could have been that.
That's what it was.
But this is the
The
feds.
state Supreme Court definitely said it was constitutional.
Yeah.
And technically speaking, the feds have no say in the matter.
I think the feds are trying to pull a.
The feds
This is
have taken
overturning
over.
Roe versus Wade, and that's the argument they're pulling.
The Supreme Court
I
could
don't care
just
if it
refuse to
overturns
see
Roe
it.
versus Wade.
That's the most likely.
They would, if they honestly wanted to avoid it, they wouldn't see it.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be on the docket.
Or they'll just say
But
that they don't have standing, and then
now they may still do that. That's a coward's way out.
Mm-hmm.
standing is a judicial doctrine that was invented in the early 1900s and has no place in American law.
I'm not familiar with the concept. You're gonna have to explain it to me.
So, standing basically is where the court determines who can and can't sue. Now, under traditional jurisprudence, whoever is wronged can sue. Understanding, even if you've been wronged or are involved in the case somehow, they basically get to invent a reason why you can't sue.
Basically, it's
Under
saying
the
that.
pretense that you haven't been wrong.
So basically, what it's saying is, if you don't have enough money, you can't have your case heard. That's what I'm getting out of that.
Even if you do have enough money, virtually all of the election lawsuits were dismissed on laches or lack of standing.
Okay.
Now, when it comes to latches comes from the French word lâche, which means lazy, and the idea is you came too late with your suit, but the way that it worked is if you had brought your lawsuit before the election, they would have said you didn't have standing because you haven't been wronged yet. But as soon as you brought the suit after you'd been wronged, well, that's latches. It's too late. It's already happened.
It's another coward's way out.
The election was the perfect example of some of the biggest problems in our judicial
It would have made sense if they'd called that, say, like a year after the election, if people were just then trying to air their grievances. But immediately after?
Yeah.
That makes no
Yeah.
sense.
Well,
Well,
the idea
well,
behind
according
standing
to
is you
the
can't do it until you've been wronged, even if it's going to wrong you.
Mm-hmm.
And then they were like, "Oh, once you've been wronged, well, you're too late. You should have done that. You should have tried to stop it before it ever happened."
that's what they're running into with the transgender issue
Mm-hmm.
because the women having men compete in their sports, they know they're going to be wrong. But if they take and file suit before it happens, they have no standing. And if they file suit afterward, it falls into latches.
So,
It's a way the left forces through to perverse uh, and illogical things that they know that the country would never agree with.
so what are they doing about the large number of transitioners or trannies who are suing their doctors for allowing them to go through with it?
They ignore it
Or is that just a civil case?
That'd
well,
be a
the
civil case.
a lot of these are civil cases. The Supreme Court doesn't do criminal cases; it does civil and process cases.
Okay.
It does
The only
criminal
times
as
it deals
well.
with criminal cases are when it's a process issue. Only when it's a process issue, or yeah, because they primarily deal in arbitration between the states and civil cases.
Seems rather arbitrary.
Technically speaking, they are the court of final appeal, though, even in a criminal case.
But they do not do criminal. They do not hand down criminal sentences. They look at the process, see if the person under criminal charges has received due process. If there's a due process violation, they kick it back down to the lower courts.
I have heard of people getting off because the Supreme Court took and negated their
Because
conviction.
that only happens when there's a due process violation, and they deem that there's been a due process violation. That is not a and then they still have to kick it back down to the criminal courts to go through the process properly.
They basically declared a
They
mistrial.
told, yeah,
Basically, yes.
I've heard of cases where they've taken and declared that the mistrial and stated the person was free and could not be tried again. They didn't kick it back to the lower court. They just kicked it out entirely.
Usually they usually they do kick it back to the lower courts.
I don't
Now,
think he
when it
was
comes to
arguing the
Miranda, they did
usual.
that as well, but when when it comes to Miranda, I mean, Miranda wasn't even a proper judgment. There's no indication that people are required to be told their rights before when they are arrested. It was not a due process violation. Thanks
Well,
for
Roe
ruining our
versus
court
Wade,
system,
they
Justice Earl
invented
Warren.
Roe versus Wade. They took and invented something that isn't in the Constitution to cover it.
Well, currently they're trying to use Roe
Yeah,
versus
the right to
Wade
privacy.
as precedent to shoot down the Texas abortion law at the federal level.
And
They're determined to force the red states to secede.
They've been determined to do
It's
that for a
like
while.
the Biden Justice Department has taken and decided that they're going to be treating parents that stand up against school boards as domestic terrorists.
Well, it's remember that old Looney Tunes episode where Bugs Bunny was up against Yosemite Sam, and he drew a line in the sand, and Yosemite Sam just stepped over it. So he stepped back and drew another line in the sand. And they did that over and over and over again until eventually he stepped to the side, drew another line in the sand, and Yosemite Sam stepped right over the cliff. It's basically the analogy for what is going on here. Because every time there's a line drawn in the sand and they step over it, they're not being challenged. They're not being they're not getting that forceful response for crossing the line. So they just keep crossing another line. And eventually it's going to come to a head.
Wait, you do realize that the Biden administration has lost every court case they filed.
No, I didn't know that.
But he's doing a Jackson. Uh, I don't care if it's unconstitutional. Let's see him enforce it.
And you got the jelly-spined Republicans who aren't doing anything, just caving in.
Like I said, they're just letting
We should be facing
line.
We should be facing a debt crisis here. I want my debt crisis. Can't keep kicking the can down the road. If they're such good leaders, they should prove it.
If they shut down the government, you know what they'll probably do like they did during the Obama administration.
Where they basically just hold the whole country hostage until they raise the debt limit?
Yeah. They took and shut down everything about the government except for the non-essential and state and national parks. They took and withheld military pay. They took and withheld Social Security. They continued welfare benefits. They shut down DC because most of it's national parks.
So
they took and shut down all the national parks.
Interesting thing about that, actually. Do you remember the government shutdown of 2014, I want to say? No, it was 2013.
I do.
The government shutdown of 2013.
And that's the one where they put cages around the national monuments?
I'm not sure. I was occupied at the time. But
it lasted like 2 weeks. It was great.
But
the Republicans should have held out longer.
What this happened while I was in boot camp, right? The government shut down in 2013. And the first thing they did was guarantee the military pay. Do you know why?
No.
Because in the government shutdown before that, when they didn't guarantee military pay, a grand majority, well, not a majority, but a large portion of the military considered that breach of contract, in which it was, and stopped working. They just stopped taking orders. Stopped doing anything. And they couldn't do anything about it because it was breach of contract.
We're looking at another standoff come December. So we'll see if the Republicans show a little spine there. They're trying to play a game of chicken, where the Democrats are forced to use reconciliation to get rid of to raise the debt ceiling rather than using it on the pork bill that they want to use it on, but they're doing it wrong. The Democrats have already proven that the Republicans will jump out of the way when it comes down to it. The Republicans have to be willing to let the government shut down. If they don't, they're not going to win.
Yep.
Simple as that.
See, the thing is,
And they're cowards.
to win a game
They
of
honestly,
chicken, you have to be willing to crash.
yeah. Now, when it comes down to it, the Republicans for a long time don't understand that the people that vote for Republicans are anti big government because most of them are for big government and think that the if the government shuts down, it's the worst thing that could possibly happen.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not true. And their base would support them stronger if they would take and just simply hold the ground and say, no, we aren't going to budge. Shut the government down. Keep it shut down. Stop and when they take and try to write the special deals to take and pay the congressman, no, we're not going to stand for it. Can't pay the Congress. Can't pay the president.
Probably bend a little to pay the military.
Can't put. Yeah, we'll bend a little for the military, but take and go through and refuse to pay the alphabet uh, bureaucracies.
Refuse to pay Planned
Don't
Parenthood.
pay any of them. And see, the thing about it is when they go through and they say, well, oh, you're going to take and shut the government down. Yes, we're going to shut the government down. It's worthless anyway, so it doesn't matter. Local governments can handle the running the country. We don't need the federal government.
Use the entire budget to pay back the debt. The government doesn't reopen until the debt's paid off.
Except
Yes,
for one problem, the debt can't be paid off.
I know.
It's too late.
That's the point.
yes. The government stays shut down until the debt's entirely paid off. No FBI, no IRS, no OSHA, no oh, and no and they need to come straight out and say we're not repaying anybody who's not paid during this time period.
Mm-hmm.
They're not working. We're not going to pay them. If you don't work, you don't eat. So go find another job.
Yeah. Especially the congressman.
Talking about just basically no welfare, no unemployment,
No social security.
no, don't get a job. Oh, the seniors would make sure that none of them got reelected. But the seniors don't have the weight they used to have.
Of course not.
The baby boom the baby boom generation are dying off.
The baby boom generation are dying off, and the generation after them aren't getting paid social security because all the social security was paid to the baby boomers. The government no longer has the money to pay them. So they're not reliant on social security.
It comes down, the system will collapse.
It comes down to
And
this. Would you rather live in a house as it rots around you until it eventually collapses on your head? Or would you rather just take a wrecking ball to it
We
and
did
start
that.
from ground zero? Yes, but that was your own
We
mistake.
did that.
That was your own mistake. That wasn't intent.
I'm sorry, I had no control of that tree whatsoever.
I know. But basically, my point being is sometimes it's better just to wreck a rotting building down to the foundations and build from scratch, rather than
Yes.
watch it decay and take out everyone and everything inside it. At least that way you can mitigate damage.
But they don't care about mitigating damage. They want to burn it all so they can reestablish a Soviet state.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's fascinating that when you actually take and you look at what they're doing and how they're doing it, it's exactly like Nazi Germany during the rise of Hitler.
Oh, a beat for beat.
And they're calling those that oppose it Nazis when they're the ones that are following the pattern of the Nazis.
Well, it's standard projection.
Thing is, there's an
Confession through
inherently
projection.
infighting among their groups because socialists don't know how to live together.
Socialists can't live together. That's the funny thing. Their whole worldview is wrapped up in them living together, and they can't live together by their very nature.
What gets me is their special interest groups they give into are contrary to each other. They're going to hit head on.
Yeah,
They can't help it.
they
You
believe
can't have the
so
transgender
firmly in
movement.
this concept of the enemy of my enemy is my friend that they neglect the simple truth that the enemy of my enemy is my enemy's enemy. It means nothing more.
Well, that was one thing that people lost sight of during World War II. Is just because the Soviets were the enemy of Germany did not make them our friends.
Yeah, and it caused the Cold War and the Vietnam War and the Korean War. And to a lesser extent,
What they
the
should have
entirety of our wars in the Middle East.
what they should have done is not taken and sent all that material to Soviets.
Yeah,
Let German gut the Russia,
and tear them apart
and
while they're
and while
overextended.
they're gutting Russia, tear it apart while they're overextended. Yes. Then we don't have the Soviet Union or Nazi Germany to deal with. Now the Soviet Union was still held out for a long time, but as long as you made sure you bombed the oil fields after the Germans took them over, you wouldn't have to worry about them being able to carry on a lengthy war.
Yeah, in which case we wouldn't have supplied weapons to Afghanistan, which means we wouldn't have had to fight we
The
wouldn't have created
Taliban
the
would never.
Taliban, so we wouldn't have to fight the Taliban.
It would
So,
have
does
changed
anyone
a
want to
lot.
talk about the Chinese? Does anyone want to talk about the Chinese fear mongering that's going on right now?
What are they doing this time?
It seems recent. Well, they've continued their flights over Taiwan, only they've made them bigger. And while yes, anyone who keeps track of the situation knows a war is probably coming, nobody knows when it's going to be. It's like there was
According
one
to
article that
Taiwan's
one expert that's
defense minister,
the, the, yeah, according to
uh,
Taiwan's defense minister, it could be by
2025.
2024. Oh, 2025, which, that's really interesting. Why would they pick that date of all dates? Why that year? It's almost like we'll have just elected a new president.
So there. I'll pause. So, where were we? I forgot.
You were in the middle of saying something about China.
Oh, yeah. It depends on which military tacticians are smart, right? So clearly, Taiwan has stated their intent. Whether that is their actual intent or not is irrelevant. They have stated their intent of 2024. If China is smart, they will wait till the U.S. fractures into a inevitable civil war, and then start the war. Then, if
I still think
Taiwan
Taiwan needs to.
if Taiwan is smart, they will be the aggressors and start everything off by
That's what I was
shooting down the
thinking.
jets. Now, their 2024 statement could
I
be
was
a
thinking.
ploy in order to get China to stand, well, to get this false sense of security. But I don't believe that because I don't believe anyone in high government in any country is competent.
Well, I think that it's
Well,
a political
according
move to try to get Biden out of office, or the Democrats out of office, and get a pro-Taiwanese president in.
No, because that would be majorly overestimating the average political acumen of the general populace. Most people that would just fly over their head of. It might be like an underhanded political jab to kind of that is specifically aimed at people who think politics. But for the average populace, they won't even think that's a
It's possible.
possibility.
well, we know that Taiwan is stockpiling weapons. They've they're just put in a new order for more fighter jets from the United States.
Mm-hmm.
They've got currently have uh, a Frenchman there that's tied to the French military complex that sells weapons, and they're talking to the Australians. We also know that Japan is ramping up its arms and did its first carrier landing in 75 years just recently.
Well, they recently got a new prime minister who is pro-Japanese rearmament, so
But they took a, I may be wrong on what I heard, but it sounds like they took a 75-year-old aircraft carrier and put it back in service.
That
hey, some of those
is
75-year-old
you
an
know
aircraft
incredibly
carriers
bad
were
idea.
good carriers.
Not anymore, they're not. I've been on an old ship.
They're going up against China.
Even if you updated it.
A ship, a steel warship, does not hold together well for 25 years, let alone 75.
That's
They,
true.
but
Especially
look
in
at their
salt water.
competition. Look at who they're up against.
It doesn't matter.
Look at
The
who they're
thing
up
would
against.
sink. The thing would sink without anyone touching it. Just from the rust alone. Do you know how much work it takes to keep a steel warship from sinking on its own without anyone fighting you? It is so much work.
Well, like I said, I'm I may have misunderstood where they landed it, but they definitely did a carrier landing recently.
Yeah. but I think it is more likely to
But
be a
And
purchased carrier than it is to be a 75-year-old
remember,
carrier.
remember, when it comes to aircraft carriers, if you can launch a jet that has its weapons, you're doing better than China.
oh well, you have to understand that even in World War II, the Japanese aircraft carriers, the big ones, could launch would be big enough to launch a modern fighter jet.
Well, the Japanese aircraft carriers in World War II were some of the best in the world.
Well, they only really had us as competition.
It's true. But when you have two of the largest, most powerful navies going at it at the time,
I think you should
Actually,
mildly adjust that. It was the two
there's the
largest, most powerful navies at the time going at it.
uh, actually, I'm going to correct both of you. It was the three largest, most powerful navies in the world going at it at the time.
Which one
what,
was the
Britain?
other one?
Great Britain.
Ah, I didn't think they
They
joined us in
were
the Pacific
endangering.
Theater.
Oh yes, they
Oh
did,
yeah,
and
they
they took
did.
a horrible beating out of it. But they but they had to get involved because Australia was in danger.
Yeah.
So you had the three biggest, most powerful navies in the entire world going head to head during World War II. Now
Now,
the Dutch was involved too, but they weren't one of the most powerful.
going back to my statements about a steel warship. Now, the audience may not realize this. In fact, just a steel ship in general. Robert, do you know what a needle gun is?
Yes, yes, I do.
So, for the
It's
sake of the audience, a needle gun is it's powered by pressurized air, right? We call it low pressure air because we use air of a lot higher pressures for different things. But it's basically the type of pressurized air that you get out of a compressor and you can use to fill the tires in your car. That sort of air, right? And we stick it
You can
to
actually buy needle guns on the civilian market.
you can because there are civilian steel ships, and it's a useful thing. But it is about uh, you can't really tell with my hands alone because cameras. But how do I put this? It is about half of well,
It's about the size. It's about the size of the Star Wars lightsaber before it's lit.
yeah, yeah. So it's around a foot long, counting its needles, and it's little needles that stick out kind of like octopus legs or squid legs, or mostly squid legs at the end of it. There's about 9 to 12 of them to 15, depending on what type of needle gun you have. And the air blows through them and they act as little jackhammers, just moving really, really fast. And you hold that up against the steel, and it's designed to literally bust away paint, primer, and rust. It doesn't work very well if there isn't rust, interestingly enough, because the rust causes the little air pockets that make the steel weak enough to actually flake off. But it will still eventually cut its way through paint, primer, and then steel. And once
It was
that's
using one of those as well. I hurt my back.
I've uh, I've had to use those things a lot. Um, but after you've knocked off all of the rust, and you can tell the rust is knocked off because you'll have this section of darkened steel. It almost looks black after you've knocked off most of the rust. And then you take this oof. It's a sander. It's a circle sander is what it is. Normally also powered by pressurized air. And you sand down the portion of the steel until you've got glossy, smooth steel again. And then you prime it, and then you paint it. Now, you have to do this over and over and over again just to keep the ship from falling apart. You do this enough times, and you don't have any steel left to sand down. And you've got to take the thing into the yards,
That's well new plate in.
cut the entire thing out, and weld a new plate in. I was on a 20-year-old ship. Well, it was just a little over 20 years old when I arrived on the ship. The thing is more than 26 years old. It's pushing 30 now. But I had to do that enough times that I was able to needle gun portions of the ship off that had to be replaced entirely and new pieces welded on. The amount of work necessary to keep a ship running is colossal. Absolutely insane.
That's why that's why they've had so much trouble with the USS Texas, is because it's rusting down. It was rusting down in its dock because it was a World War I vessel.
There is a reason why the only ship that has lasted for 100 years or more, specifically more in this case, is the USS Constitution in the U.S. Navy. Because it is made primarily of wood, it is a lot easier to maintain and replace parts of.
I think the British Navy have some that's actually older.
Well, the British Navy might, but I said in the U.S. Navy. I know the Dutch Navy has some that are older.
Did you know German? You know the German Navy still has a ironclad,
I did
a
not.
monitor type ironclad. Yeah,
A Monitor type
it's
ironclad I can believe, but not a Merrimack type ironclad.
right, a monitor type.
And for people who don't know the difference, the Monitor and the Merrimack were the first two ironclads to actually fight each other in the Civil War. One of which was was a
The Monitor
steamship that was converted into an ironclad by having steel plates added onto it, and the other one was a much more.
which was American.
And the other one was built as an ironclad from the ground up.
Yeah, that was the Monitor. The Monitor was revolutionary and was the predecessor to all modern steel ships.
Yes. So, three guesses which one would last longer. The one that was primarily wood with steel bolted over it, or the one that was built as steel from the ground up?
The one that was built by steel from the ground up is still in existence. But they have to jack up the turret and then manually turn it to rotate the turret.
Yeah. Now, funny thing about
Then lower
the
it back
Monitor,
down before they can fire.
if I remember correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dad, but if I remember correctly, the Monitor and the Merrimack never actually beat each other.
No,
They were
That
the
is true.
first ironclads to fight each other, but neither of them had enough firepower to sink the other ship, or to even
Though the
penetrate
Merrimack
the
was
other ship's
damaged.
they
hull.
just bounced off. They said that the bullets, the cannonballs hitting the sides of the ships were so loud it was like being inside a giant bell.
On the same note, though, the most effective way to sink an ironclad at the time were underwater mines, which at the time were called torpedoes. Because the torpedoes, as we know of them today, did not exist yet.
Hence the
Light
famous
the
expression.
torpedoes full steam ahead.
Which was a direct quote from Admiral Farragut when they were storming a uh, a port in Mississippi, I want to
Cuba.
say, or was it Alabama?
Cuba.
It's pretty sure
The
it was.
Spanish-American
Cuba.
War.
It's pretty sure it was Civil War.
Pretty sure it's Spanish American War.
I'm checking.
I'm pretty sure it's Spanish American.
I'm gonna check. We've got the internet. Because I was pretty sure it was Civil War.
Well, I don't have my Blue Jackets.
New
back
Orleans
with-
Battle for Vicksburg.
Okay, yep, Civil War. You're right.
Civil War.
Vicksburg was a major battle.
Haha. All that time they spent drilling naval history into my head, and I didn't forget it in the 8 years that you've had 20 years to forget.
Try 30.
It's actually 30 now, yeah. But we should probably change the subject because I've got way too much of this this information just that I could go on and on about. Because this is my field of specialty while you guys have your fancy college degrees.
The thing about it is I share that specialty as well.
Yeah, but I got more years in.
Yeah, true. Yeah, that's true.
Ugh.
Now, when it comes down to it, Australia, Canada, both are taking more after the communist Chinese than they are the United States.
Yeah.
I'm so ready
But
for
at
the
this
Australian Revolution. Return Australia to its 1900s.
Taking after the current
gun-toting
United
culture.
States is not exactly something to aim for either.
No, but it's gotten to a point where you got the blue states, which are trying to imitate the Chinese, and you've got the red states, which are going for freedom. And Biden's word counts for nothing in the red states, but it's almost sacrosanct in the blue states.
Well, they've made it a religion. That's what they've done. It is the religion of the state.
And then you've
You
got
must obey. Heretics will be punished.
then you got the and they're pushing hard for that. But the blue, then there's the purple state, and I don't know what they're going to do with those if there's a civil war.
Offer them the blue pill or the red
Fight,
pill.
fight, 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 fight.
Because technically speaking, New Mexico's a purple state. It's got a Republican Congress and a Democrat governor.
Same with Arizona.
Yeah, Arizona's a purple state. But Arizona's already stated that if the red states secede, they'll go with them. I don't think that'll be the case, actually, because they've got a lot of Californians flooding into the state.
Little off topic. In fact, very off topic. But I find it really, really funny that a landlocked state had their name associated with the most famous battleship in U.S. history.
Yes, that oceanfront property in Arizona.
Which happens to be in Hawaii.
So if Taiwan goes to war before America splits apart, who's joining the Merc organizations? Who's going Merc to help them?
Well, I've already said before that I will rejoin the Navy if war with China breaks out.
Oh, see, I don't want to be tied to the U.S. military if with China breaks out. I'd rather be under sensible command.
That's just it, Robert. I'd get to see the chaff burn away in real time.
That's true. In a major war, these current political officers wouldn't last well.
In fact, I can.
But you'd still have to go through the tragedy.
Well, yeah. But I can only think of one commander and up that I've met that would do well in a war.
From what I see of college students, I don't put a lot of stock in the officer corps right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, the one I was talking about
See, if they don't
started
try to pull a
enlisted.
Vietnam, if they don't try to pull a Vietnam, then I'd be tempted to join. But I don't trust them not to just try another Vietnam
That's
or
why you
another
gotta join the
Afghanistan or
Navy or the
another
Air Force.
Iraq or.
That's why you gotta join the Navy or the Air Force and avoid the Marines or the Army. That way you're not used as shock troops.
But, but they get all the fun.
They do get all the funds.
They get to actually see the places.
They also usually get paid in brass.
I didn't say funds. I didn't
Oh, did you say fun?
funds. I said fun.
Oh, I heard funds.
Yes. I wasn't talking
Getting
about
shot at is
money.
not fun.
I do not take getting
Getting
shot
shot
at
at
as
is
being
not fun.
But you get to shoot back.
No.
That's the fun part.
I have developed a specialty in the Navy, and I am good at it. So I might as well stick with it, especially when I'm not a very good shot.
Well, speaking as somebody who is a good shot and has been shot, it's no fun to get shot at. But the fact is that if China invades Taiwan, we're going to have to be involved because they produce most of the chips.
Mhm.
So and their economy is causing such a political instability in China that Xi Jinping, if he wants to remain in power, is almost going to have to try to take Taiwan.
Which, ironically, if he crashes their economy, it's going to cause riots. Because
That's why he's
it'll be
got
proof of
to
concept.
keep without taking in. He will have. Well, he's got riots now.
Yeah, but it'll be worse.
If he really wants to keep control, if he wants to keep control, he's going to have to take and do something to get another enemy.
Yeah.
And to fulfill the dream of uniting China, he's got to take Taiwan.
And then Korea.
So, yeah. But so as he's looking at it,
And
he's
Mongolia.
got to have an enemy. So if they take and And for him to maintain that power, he's got to go to war. It's either Taiwan, India, or Mongolia. Because North Korea is a puppet state
Yeah.
for China.
And South Korea is too well
And
defended
if
at
he
this
goes into
point.
North Korea, South Korea, he goes to war with us if he goes to war there.
Mm-hmm.
And he knows it. He's got it in his head that if he goes to war with Taiwan, that we'll just step back. And he's already threatened to nuke Japan if they get involved.
Well, if he nukes Japan, we'll definitely get involved.
Yeah.
Although, if two
And
nukes
Australia
created
is.
anime, if two nukes created anime, I'm curious to see what three nukes does.
Did that create anime?
Indirectly, yes. Um, it was the creation of anime was a combination of features, but it was partially due to the United States controlling their media. So one of the only things they could do to to create their own culture was things like anime and things like the first Godzilla movie, which was like 9 years after the bombs fell.
It was in the late 50s
Well,
anyway.
it was definitely a political movie.
Yeah,
Godzilla was a definitely an anti-nuclear political movie.
yeah, but it was created just, I think, the year they stopped being as directly controlled. Their media stopped being as directly controlled by outside interests.
I think that was about the time, the period that Sarakawa was putting out all those samurai movies.
Yes, yes, it was
Kurosawa, you mean?
because they were trying
Kurosawa,
to
yeah, that's right.
trying to establish, well, reestablish their own culture that was rapidly dying.
Kurosawa made some good movies.
Oh yeah,
Without him, we wouldn't have the good, the bad, and the ugly.
well, yeah, because that movie was basically ripped wholesale and turned into a western.
Now, no, A Fistful of Dollars was ripped wholesale.
So was oh man, Magnificent Seven.
Yes.
That one actually wasn't ripped wholesale,
It pretty much was.
but it was very similar. The
I would
townspeople
say
actually
it
fought
was.
in the Seven Samurai.
They did in the Magnificent Seven too,
That's true.
sort of.
No, they didn't. They chickened out.
Not like they did. They took the coward's way out in the Magnificent Seven. They didn't portray the Mexican peasants as being as as brave as they portrayed the Japanese villagers.
Maybe
Which
I'm
is
getting
funny
it
because the
confused with the
Japanese
newer
villagers were
Magnificent
portrayed as
Seven, in
utter
which case they
cowards.
actually did.
They actually did in the
But
newer one, I
essentially they
believe.
did take and rip it off.
Yeah.
They did. And then there was what's its name? Star Wars was a ripoff of one of his movies, the first Star Wars movie. That is to say, Episode 4.
I wouldn't say that. Star Wars was an example of what happens when a writer gets hold of the hero's journey and thinks it's the greatest thing ever, so copies it beat for beat, even when it doesn't make sense.
Well, no, the whole, well, right down to the with the rebellion and the old man and
Yes,
trying to smuggle the princess.
I mean
Yeah,
everything
that
beat for
was
beat, the hero's
ripped off of one of
journey.
That was a ripoff of one of
that's
Kurosawa's
actually
movies. I
Which one?
forget what it's
I
called.
can't remember the
I
name
forget
of
the
it, but
name
yeah,
of
it
it.
was something Fortress or something.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think so. It was enough. I think he actually got sued
I don't
for
know.
it and
Star
lost.
Wars. Star Wars is weird because it's one of those series that I used to really love, and now somehow it just feels icky. The entire thing.
Well, Disney kind of took and reinforced
Dis-
that image.
Disney got hold of it, created their new movies, and by the time I had watched two of them, I didn't want to see anything about the series ever again. It retroactively ruined the series for me. And I didn't think that was possible.
Used to be really into Star Wars.
Mandalorian was pretty decent.
I watched part of The Mandalorian. I couldn't really get into it. But I've never had that soft spot for space westerns that you two have.
Yeah.
I
Of
find
course, you see, when
I
I
find
wrote a
space
space
westerns kind of
western,
dull.
when I wrote the space western, it didn't come out like a space western.
Yeah, it was closer to Trigun though, minus the comedy. Or minus as much comedy.
I need to watch Trigun again.
Tr-
I don't think I've ever seen it.
yes you have. You introduced me to it.
Yeah.
Did I?
Yeah.
You've seen at least some of it.
The problem with Trigun
It's a
is
space western.
no. The problem with Trigun is as it goes on, the character stops being the main character stops being the comic relief and starts taking himself too seriously. That's the biggest problem with Trigun. If the guy had taken himself seriously from the beginning, it wouldn't bother me as much. But as the series goes on, he seems less and less in character the more they focus on him, and it just I don't know. It feels like it's like a direct parallel to what I mentioned as the cardinal sin of a romantic comedy series, where they shift from one tone to the other to a degree so heavily that it no longer feels like the series you started watching, and it no longer is worth watching at that point. And Trigun does that. They go from heavy comedy, laugh up episodic to heavy drama where every subsequent episode is too connected to the next. And it just doesn't feel like the same series anymore. And when did we switch topics so heavily?
You
We're
mentioned
good at
space
that.
western.
The
We
stealth.
could we could
Well,
have a completely different show about analyzing writing on its
Anime.
own. Anime, movies, TV shows, books, just writing in general, radio shows, even. We could talk for hours on that alone, but I feel like that's not this show.
but
It
you want
isn't
to
this
talk about
show, though. We do wonder.
That's true. We do wander, and
you,
we've
you
gone
want to talk
into
about
literary analysis before.
inconsistent. If you want to talk about inconsistent tone and inconsistent writing, Lights Out is the prime example.
Well, the difference between that is Lights Out was created in a way where every single episode is written by a different writer and
No,
distinct
it's
from.
actually all by the same guy.
Really? Okay.
Yeah,
Regardless, every episode is supposed to be distinct and separate from the others.
and some of them are just so bad it's funny.
They're. Yeah, but you can only get so much
Well,
inspiration.
I think we ought to cut this. Call it an end.
We should definitely call it an end here. Do we leave the last bit we were covering in, or just edit it out? Is the question.
That's up to you.
Uh, I don't know, but we're so far off topic. We can continue talking this off
Offline, yeah.
air.
All right, I'll cut the recording here then.
So if you
Oh, I haven't cut it yet. You can still do your outro if you want.
Robert,
I don't want to do it this time. I do it every time.
All right, I'm cutting it then.